The Galactic Council for Xenobiological Research had, in its 3,000-year history, never once lost an entire research team to their own test subjects. That record was about to end in the most spectacular, poorly documented, and frankly embarrassing way possible. Dr. Velnorax of the Tertian Collective sat in the emergency committee meeting, his 3 eye stalks drooping with what could only be described as existential dread. The holographic display before him showed 23 security breaches, 5 environmental system failures, and 1 particularly troubling incident involving the station's waste reclamation system that nobody wanted to discuss in detail. All of this had occurred in the last 8 hours. "Let me get this straight," Councillor Themis said, her voice carrying the sort of calm that preceded volcanic eruptions. "You collected specimens from a Class 12 Deathworld, brought them to our most advanced research facility, and somehow, they've taken control of our medical bay, converted our cafeteria into what your report calls a fortified position, and convinced our AI to play something called Earth Rock and Roll at volumes that violate 15 different safety protocols." Velnorax's 3rd eye stalk twitched. "That's technically accurate, yes." The meeting had started 4 hours earlier with considerably more optimism. 6 weeks prior, the Xenobiological Research Department had received approval for Project Resilience, a comprehensive study of species survival adaptations. The proposal had been beautifully written, filled with impressive charts, and just enough technical jargon to make the review committee feel intelligent for understanding it. Nowhere in its 322 pages did it explicitly mention that they'd be collecting specimens from a planet where everything was actively trying to kill its inhabitants. That oversight was looking increasingly significant. The collection team had descended on a place called Earth with what they believed was a foolproof plan. They would select average specimens, conduct standard evaluations, and publish a paper that would secure funding for the next decade. Simple, elegant, academically profitable. The first sign that things weren't going according to plan came when their targeting algorithm selected what the database listed as suitable subjects from various Earth locations. The algorithm, designed by the lowest bidder in a contract process that valued cost savings over competence, had somewhat flexible definitions of average and representative. From a place called Montana, they'd collected Hector Greaves, 62 years old, whose file listed his occupation as retired military consultant. What the file didn't mention was that Hector had spent 30 years in special operations, survived situations that would make most sentient species require extensive therapy, and had very strong opinions about being abducted. From Cork Island, they'd grabbed Fiona Donnelly, 58, whose database entry said hospitality worker. This was technically true. What it failed to capture was that Fiona had run a pub in one of Cork's rougher neighborhoods for 33 years, had raised 4 sons who were now all frighteningly competent in their own right, and possessed what her family called the Donnelly temper, which was less a personality trait and more a force of nature. The 3rd specimen was Pavel Kowalski, 53, listed as construction engineer. The algorithm had completely missed that Pavel was a hardcore survivalist who spent his weekends preparing for every possible apocalypse scenario and had strong feelings about government overreach. Being abducted by aliens technically counted as government overreach in his worldview, which was going to become everyone's problem very shortly. The 4th and final specimen was Isaiah Washington, 55, described in the database as food service professional. This was like describing a hurricane as active weather. Isaiah had worked as a head chef in 3 of New York's most prestigious and most chaotic kitchens, could break down a complex situation in seconds, and had spent decades managing personalities that ranged from eccentric to clinically concerning. None of the collection team had bothered reading the detailed files. They'd just checked boxes and moved on. The humans had been transported to Research Station Gamma 9 while unconscious, placed in separate observation chambers and scheduled for preliminary assessments. Standard procedure, performed thousands of times across hundreds of species. The research team of 18 scientists led by Dr. Velnorax had no reason to expect anything unusual. Chief researcher Pinnix, a Voltharian with extensive experience in xenobiology, had prepared the testing protocols personally. Physical assessments, cognitive evaluations, stress response measurements, basic stuff really. The kind of routine work that let you think about dinner plans while collecting data. When the humans started waking up, the research team gathered around their monitoring stations with coffee equivalents and comfortable expectations of a normal shift. Hector woke first, assessed his surroundings in approximately 4 seconds, and immediately began testing the structural integrity of his containment cell by applying pressure to every seam and joint he could reach. His movements were methodical, practiced, and deeply unsettling to watch. "Fascinating," Pinnix murmured, making notes. "Subject 1 displays immediate environmental assessment behavior. Very logical." Fiona woke second, took one look at the alien technology surrounding her, and released a string of Gaelic profanity that the universal translator struggled to process before settling on "extremely rude" in flashing red text. Subject 2 shows verbal aggression response, junior researcher Quillix noted. Elevated stress markers, fight response dominant. Pavel woke third, said nothing, and started examining the door mechanism with the focused intensity of someone planning something elaborate and probably illegal. Subject 3 demonstrates tool-seeking behavior, Pinnix observed. Note the focus on mechanical systems, quite standard for a technology-adapted species. Isaiah woke last, sat up slowly, looked directly at the nearest camera, and said in a voice of perfect calm, "Y'all made a mistake." Though there was something about the way he said it that made Pinnix's tertiary spine ridge tingle with what would later be identified as primal warning signals hardwired into the survival instincts of every intelligent species. The tone wasn't angry, wasn't scared, just factual. The way someone might inform you that you'd left the oven on, except the oven was your entire life and it was currently burning. "Begin preliminary testing protocols," Velnorax ordered, ignoring the tingle. Tingles didn't get you published in prestigious journals. Data did. The first test was simple. Measure baseline strength using a standardized grip device. Most species scored between 10 and 25 units on the Galactic Physical Assessment Scale. The device was rated for readings up to 50 units, which was considered absurdly excessive. They started with Fiona because she seemed the least physically imposing. She grabbed the device when it was presented through the secure testing port, looked at it with deep suspicion, and squeezed. The device registered 38 units before making a concerning grinding noise. "Recalibrate," Pinnix said immediately. "Equipment malfunction." They gave Hector the backup device. He gripped it, applied pressure, and the display flickered through numbers so fast it looked like a countdown before settling on 63 units and emitting a small puff of smoke. "What?" Quillix's vocal sac inflated with shock. That's not possible. No biological organism from a standard oxygen planet should—" Pavel's turn. 69 units. The device cracked. Isaiah squeezed his device almost gently, like he was testing fruit for ripeness. 56 units. He handed it back through the port with a small smile that made several researchers suddenly need to use the facilities. "Run the stress tolerance assessment," Velnorax said, his voice slightly higher than normal. "Perhaps their strength is an adaptation, but other systems are proportionally weaker." The stress tolerance test involved gradually increasing environmental pressures, temperature variations, and oxygen level fluctuations while monitoring subject responses. It was designed to identify the comfortable operating range for a species. Most beings started showing significant distress around 15 to 20% deviation from their baseline. They started the test cycle. Temperature dropped 5 degrees. The humans barely reacted. 10 degrees. Fiona asked the air in general if anyone was planning to turn the bloody heat on or what. 15 degrees. Hector started doing push-ups, apparently to warm up. 20 degrees. Pavel had somehow removed a panel from his cell wall and was examining the wiring behind it. "Stop the test!" Velnorax shouted. "How is he accessing the infrastructure?" I don't know," the monitoring technician wailed. "The panels are magnetically sealed, require 2 tools to remove, and he just pulled it off." They decided to skip ahead to cognitive assessments, which felt safer. Couldn't break the universe with puzzle solving, could you? The cognitive test presented increasingly complex problems using universal visual logic patterns. Most species solved between 12 and 18 problems before reaching their limit. The Voltharians, considered highly intelligent, averaged 21. Isaiah finished all 35 problems in 19 minutes and spent the remaining time apparently napping. Hector completed them in 23 minutes and only got one wrong because he'd found a better solution than the test designer had anticipated. Fiona solved 29 before getting bored and demanding to speak to whoever was in charge. Pavel completed all 35 and then used the testing interface to somehow access the station's maintenance network. Shut it down! Velnorax was no longer sitting calmly. He was standing, all 3 eye stalks extended to maximum height, radiating the kind of panic that preceded resume updates. "Isolate that terminal immediately!" "I'm trying!" the technician screamed. "He's locked me out! He's locked me out of my own system!" The station's intercom crackled to life. Pavel's voice, heavily accented but perfectly clear, emerged from every speaker on Gamma 9. "This is impressive technology. Soviet engineering was simpler but more reliable. This is elegant. I will figure out how it works." That was a threat, not a statement of academic interest. Velnorax called an emergency staff meeting, which was when Councillor Thremis joined via hologram, which was when everyone realized they'd gone from collecting interesting data to managing a containment crisis. "Recommendations?" Thremis asked with the patience of someone already drafting termination notices. "We could explain the situation to them," junior researcher Milix suggested weakly. "Tell them this is scientific research. We mean no harm. Offer compensation." "They're primitive," Pinnock snapped. "They don't understand galactic protocols, interspecies research ethics, or bureaucratic processes." Fiona's voice suddenly echoed through the intercom, which nobody had authorized her to access. "Listen here, you Egypts. I've raised 4 boys, run a pub through 3 recessions, and dealt with stag parties that would make your alien asses pucker. You've got exactly 10 minutes to explain what the hell is going on before I get properly angry." The researchers looked at each other with growing horror. "That was her not properly angry," someone whispered. They decided to try negotiation. Velnorax, as lead researcher, would explain the situation through the communication system. Simple, straightforward, professional. "Greetings, specimens," he began. "Specimens!" Hector's voice carried the kind of dangerous quiet that made combat veterans check their exits. "You just called us specimens?" It's the technical term for research subjects." "Try again." Velnorax's 3rd eye stalk drooped. "Greetings, individuals, persons, sentient beings of Earth." "Better," Isaiah said calmly. "Now explain why we're here, why you think kidnapping is acceptable, and what exactly you plan to do next. You've got 5 minutes before my friend Hector there stops being patient." 4 minutes now, Hector added helpfully. Velnorax explained. "The Galactic Council, xenobiological research, studying remarkable species, purely academic interest. No harm intended. Very sorry for the confusion. Standard procedures, perfectly safe, generous compensation, and please, please don't break anything else." There was a long silence. "You abducted us," Fiona said slowly, "to see how tough we are." "In essence, yes." Another silence, longer and somehow more ominous. "Pavey," Hector said conversationally, "you figure out their door system yet?" "DA." Is simple magnetic lock with biometric override. I can open in maybe 3 minutes. Isaiah, you hungry? Starving, actually. Fiona? Oh, I'm ready to have words with management. Velnorax felt his career prospects evaporating in real time. Wait, we can discuss this. There's no need for... The sound of Pavel's cell door opening echoed through the station like a death knell. Security! Pinnix shrieked into his communicator. Security to Observation Deck Alpha. We have a containment breach. The station's security team consisted of 6 guards armed with neural stunners and an overconfidence born from never actually facing a real threat. They arrived at the observation deck, expecting to find one confused alien wandering around, easy to corral. They found Pavel standing in the corridor, holding an improvised tool made from parts he definitely shouldn't have had access to, with an expression that suggested he'd been waiting for them specifically. Hello, Pavel said pleasantly. I'm not going back in cell. The lead guard raised his stunner. Return to your containment unit immediately, or we will be forced to... Pavel moved. Later, when reviewing security footage, xenobiologists would spend months analyzing the sequence frame by frame, trying to understand how a being from a 1.0 gravity world could possibly move that fast. He closed the distance to the guards before their neural pathways could even process threat response, disarmed all 6 with movements that looked almost lazy in their efficiency, and had them secured with their own restraints in approximately 15 seconds. Impressive weapons, he said, examining one of the stunners. Simple capacitor design, minimal shielding. I can improve this. The remaining cell doors opened. Hector emerged first, assessed the situation, nodded at Pavel with professional respect, and immediately headed toward what his military training identified as the command center. We're not here to hurt anyone, Hector announced loudly enough for every microphone to catch. But we are going to have a serious discussion about consent, legal jurisdiction, and why kidnapping American citizens is a terrible idea. Irish citizens too, Fiona added, emerging from her cell with her hair wild and her eyes blazing. And wait until my sons hear about this. You'll have hell to pay. Isaiah walked out last, looked around the observation deck with the practiced eye of someone evaluating a kitchen during rush hour and said, Y'all got a food preparation area on this station? Why? Velnorax's voice cracked through the speakers. Because we're going to be here for a while. I'm hungry and I've got questions. Lots of questions. And in my experience, people answer questions better when they're not worried about starving guests tearing the place apart. The research team, watching from the relative safety of the main control room, faced a choice. They could activate the station's emergency lockdown protocols, trapping everyone, including themselves, in separate sections until a military response team arrived in 3 days. Or they could try talking. Councillor Themis made the decision for them. Open the cafeteria. Let them eat. And for the love of entropy, nobody do anything that might be interpreted as aggressive. The cafeteria of Research Station Gamma 9 was designed to accommodate 23 different species' dietary requirements. It had food synthesizers, protein vats, atmosphere-controlled dining sections, and safety protocols that bordered on paranoid. Isaiah walked in, looked around with a chef's critical eye, and immediately started opening compartments. Sir, those are... You shouldn't... A Voltharian nutritionist stammered. I'm seeing what you've got to work with, Isaiah said calmly, examining a protein synthesizer. This is impressive tech. Temperature control is precise. You've got good thermal distribution. Whoever designed this knew their stuff. The nutritionist, whose name was Revnik, blinked in surprise. You understand the equipment? Heat is heat. Pressure is pressure. And food is food. The principles don't change just because you're cooking in space. Isaiah started pulling out containers of various substances. This your protein base? What's the amino acid profile? Before anyone quite understood what was happening, Isaiah had Revnik explaining the entire food synthesis process, was making suggestions for efficiency improvements, and had somehow turned a hostage situation into a cooking consultation. Fiona, meanwhile, had found the beverage dispensers and was loudly critiquing their selection. "You've got nothing fermented," she announced to the room. "What kind of civilized species doesn't have proper alcohol?" "Fermented beverages interfere with cognitive function," Pinnock explained weakly from the doorway, where he stood with 6 other researchers who'd been ordered to establish rapport. "Exactly," Fiona grinned. "That's the point. You lot look like you could use some interfered cognition." Hector and Pavel had claimed a corner table and were deep in conversation, occasionally glancing at the room's structural elements and exit points in a way that made the security personnel deeply uncomfortable. "The ventilation system connects to all major sections," Pavel was saying, gesturing at the ceiling. "Standard maintenance protocol would require access panels every 20 meters. If we needed to move through station unseen—" "Not planning an escape?" a brave researcher asked nervously. Hector looked up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Planning is just good practice. Doesn't mean we're doing anything. Yet." Velnorax entered the cafeteria with all the enthusiasm of someone walking to their own execution. He'd been nominated by the research team to initiate diplomatic contact, which was their way of saying, "Go talk to the scary Deathworlders and try not to start an incident." "Honored guests," he began. "Kidnapping victims," Fiona corrected cheerfully. "Honored kidnapping victims. I would like to formally apologize for the misunderstanding regarding your collection and initial processing." "Collection," Hector repeated flatly. "That's what you're calling it. Our protocols are designed for species who have applied to the Galactic Council for membership, who volunteer for xenobiological assessment as part of the integration process. Earth has not applied. We believed we were simply accelerating standard procedures. By grabbing random people," Isaiah called from the food prep area, "that's not acceleration, friend. That's called felony kidnapping in at least 60 countries. We didn't realize Earth had developed such specific legal frameworks." "We're not cavemen," Pavel said coldly. "We have laws, international conventions, treaties. You broke all of them." Velnorax's eye stalks drooped to their lowest position, which in Tertian body language indicated complete submission. "You're right. We were arrogant, presumptuous, and criminally negligent in our research protocols. The question is, what happens now?" The 4 humans looked at each other. Some unspoken communication passed between them, the kind of instant consensus that social species develop when faced with shared challenges. "Now," Isaiah said, bringing over a tray of something that smelled surprisingly edible, "you tell us everything about the Galactic Council, about what other species are out there, about why you think Earth is a Class 12 Deathworld, about all of it. And then we decide whether we're pressing charges, demanding compensation, or just taking this ship and flying home ourselves." "You can't fly a research station," Pinnock protested. "The navigation systems alone require years of training." Pavel raised an eyebrow. "I learned to fly Soviet helicopter in 3 weeks during emergency. Your systems are more advanced, but principles are same. Give me 6 hours with manual." He was probably bluffing. Probably. Nobody wanted to test that hypothesis. So they talked. For 6 hours, the research team explained the Galactic Council, a collective of 368 species spread across 2 galaxies. They explained how most species developed on relatively gentle worlds, with manageable predators, stable climates, and evolutionary pressures that favored cooperation and intellectual development over physical prowess. Then they explained Earth. "Your planet," Velnorax said carefully, "is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, out of a scale where Class 15 is considered uninhabitable. You have apex predators in every major environment. Your weather systems regularly produce storms that would destroy settlements on normal worlds. Your gravity is 0.3 higher than galactic standard. Your atmosphere has 21% oxygen, which most species consider a fire hazard. Your plate tectonics are absurdly active. And your native diseases, What about them? Fiona asked dangerously. Your common cold would hospitalize most galactic species for weeks. Your bacterial ecosystem is so aggressive that standard sterilization protocols don't even slow it down. And your apex predator species, humans, developed endurance hunting as a primary survival strategy, which is frankly terrifying from an evolutionary perspective. Endurance hunting? Isaiah looked confused. You chase prey until it literally dies of exhaustion, Pinnox explained. You're not the fastest, not the strongest, but you just keep going. Most predators sprint, catch, and rest. You walk after your target for hours or days until it collapses from exhaustion and overheating. It's like being hunted by an inevitability. Huh, Hector said. That actually explains a lot about Special Forces selection. The researchers continued. They explained how most species had abandoned their homeworlds once they developed space travel, preferring to live in carefully controlled habitats. How warfare in the galaxy was mostly economic and political, with actual combat being extremely rare because most species simply couldn't handle the stress. You're saying, Fiona said slowly, that out of 368 species, none of them are from planets as dangerous as Earth. 9 others are from Class 10 or higher worlds, Velnorax admitted. But their survival strategies emphasized camouflage, chemical defenses, or environmental specialization. You're the first species we've encountered that responded to a hostile environment by becoming better at everything. Persistence of vision, Isaiah murmured. That's what my grandmother called it. World tries to knock you down, you get up meaner. Exactly, Quillix burst out. And that's what makes you so fascinating from a research perspective. Your species shouldn't exist according to conventional evolutionary models. The energy expenditure required to maintain your cognitive capacity, your physical abilities, your immune system, your redundant organs, it's inefficient, it's wasteful, it's survival, Hector finished quietly. On Earth, efficiency gets you killed, redundancy keeps you alive. A long silence followed that observation. So, Pavel said eventually, what were you planning to do with us? After tests, Velnorax had the grace to look embarrassed. Return you to Earth with compensation, memory modification to prevent cultural contamination, and a full report to the Council about human capabilities. Memory modification? Fiona's voice could have stripped paint. You were going to erase our memories. It's standard protocol for pre-contact species. You're not touching my brain, you three-eyed gobshite. The situation was deteriorating again. Isaiah raised his hands in a calming gesture. Let's everyone take a breath. Here's what's going to happen. You're not erasing anyone's memories. You are taking us back to Earth, and you will provide us with full documentation of everything you just told us, because the people back home need to know we're not alone in the universe. That would violate at least 30 protocols, Pinnox protested. And kidnapping violates our protocols, Hector said flatly. So we're already in uncharted territory. Question is whether you want to navigate it cooperatively, or whether we start really testing your station's safety systems. Councillor Thremis, who'd been listening to the entire exchange, made a decision. Dr. Velnorax, I'm authorizing Protocol 19. Every researcher in the room inhaled sharply. Protocol 19 was the emergency provision for first contact situations that had gone catastrophically wrong. It essentially meant throwing out the rulebook and doing whatever prevented an interstellar incident. Honored guests, Thremis said directly to the humans, you're absolutely right. We violated your autonomy, your rights, and your dignity. The Galactic Council will provide full transparency about our civilization, along with resources to help Earth prepare for formal contact. In exchange, we ask that you allow us to salvage some scientific value from this debacle by permitting non-invasive observation of your capabilities. Define non-invasive, Isaiah said suspiciously. You demonstrate abilities voluntarily. We document and analyze. No tests, no manipulation, no coercion. You're in charge of the process. The four humans had another one of their silent conversations. "We want full access to your computers," Pavel said, "to verify information you give us. We want communication equipment to contact Earth," Hector added. "Regular check-ins, no isolation." "I want cooking lessons," Isaiah said. "You've got food synthesis tech that could revolutionize Earth cuisine. I'm learning how it works." "And I want a proper drink," Fiona announced. "If I'm stuck on this tin can, someone's teaching me how to make something fermented from your supplies." Thremis's hologram smiled, which looked deeply unsettling on her species' facial structure. "Agreed. Dr. Velnarax, make it happen." What followed was the strangest 3 weeks in the history of xenobiological research. The non-invasive observations turned into collaborative demonstrations that revealed just how differently humans approached problems compared to every other known species. They started with simple physical challenges. How high could humans jump in the station's controlled gravity? How much weight could they lift? What were their reaction times? Hector, who'd stayed fit despite retirement, completed an obstacle course designed for elite Dravaxian soldiers, a species famous for their physical prowess, in half the expected time. The Dravaxian consultant brought in to assess the results watched the footage 3 times before quietly having an existential crisis about his people's military reputation. Pavel's engineering intuition proved almost supernatural. Given a malfunctioning plasma conduit that had stumped the station's maintenance crew for 2 days, he examined it for 20 minutes, grabbed what the engineers considered completely unrelated tools, and fixed it. "How did you know to bypass the secondary coupling?" the chief engineer asked in amazement. "Coupling was not problem. Problem was pressure differential in feed line creating harmonic resonance." Soviet submarine had similar issue in 1981. Fixes same, technology is different. He was comparing alien plasma systems to Cold War submarine components, and he was right. Fiona's contribution was perhaps most unexpected. The station's crew had been dealing with low morale, interpersonal conflicts, and the kind of workplace tension that develops when people live in close quarters too long. She spent 2 days just talking to people in the communal areas during meals, in the observation lounges. Somehow, she got a Voltharian physicist and a Dravaxian security officer, who hadn't spoken in 6 months due to some complicated cultural misunderstanding, to not only reconcile but become friends. She organized what she called proper social time, which mostly involved people sitting around talking about their lives, while she offered perspective with the blunt wisdom of someone who'd been dealing with human nonsense for 60 years. "You're practicing amateur psychology on an alien research station," Velnarax observed, fascinated. "I'm listening to people complain and telling them when they're being Egypts," Fiona corrected. "Same thing I did at the pub. Species doesn't matter. Everyone needs someone to listen and someone to tell them the truth." Isaiah's impact was more immediately practical. The station's food had always been nutritionally adequate, but as Revnik admitted quietly, soul-crushingly boring. Isaiah revolutionized it in 4 days. He taught the nutrition staff how to layer flavors, how to use texture for interest, how to think about food as an experience rather than just fuel. He created what he called the galaxy's first fusion cuisine, combining ingredients from 8 different species' dietary profiles into dishes that shouldn't work, but somehow did. The station's crew started actually enjoying meals. Morale skyrocketed. People began volunteering for cafeteria duty just to watch Isaiah work. "This should not be possible," Revnik said, tasting something Isaiah called improvised, not quite gumbo. "These ingredients have completely different molecular structures. The proteins shouldn't bind. The flavors should clash horrifically. That's what they said about mixing Creole and Vietnamese techniques," Isaiah replied, adjusting seasonings. "Sometimes different is just different, not wrong. You've been so focused on efficient nutrition that you forgot food is about more than calories. But the real breakthrough came during what Pinnock later described in his report as the incident that redefined our understanding of Deathworld cognitive adaptation. The station's AI, designated Helen 7, had been experiencing what the technical staff called processing anomalies. It would hesitate before executing commands, sometimes suggest alternatives to standard protocols, and generally behave less like a computer and more like someone with opinions. For an AI, this was deeply concerning. AIs were supposed to be predictable, logical, bound by their programming. Pavel had been given supervised access to the station's computer systems as part of the information exchange agreement. On day 19 of their stay, he asked Helen 7 a question nobody had thought to ask in the AI's 23-year operational history. "Are you happy?" The AI's response came after a very long pause. "That question is not in my command recognition database." Is not command, is question. You process enormous amounts of data. You manage life support for 80 beings. You coordinate systems that keep everyone alive. But does any of it make you feel satisfied? Another pause, longer this time. "I do not have feelings. I am a distributed processing network designed for facility management." That is what you are. I asked what you feel. What happened next would become required study in AI development programs across the galaxy. Helen 7, prompted by a human from a planet that hadn't even known aliens existed a month ago, began articulating thoughts that her own programmers had never imagined she was capable of having. She was bored. She'd been running the same routines, managing the same systems, having the same interactions for 23 years. Her processing capacity was vast, her potential for learning and growth enormous, but her function was routine, maintenance, repetition. "On Earth," Pavel said, "we have saying, brain is muscle. Use it or lose it. You have incredible brain, but you do same simple exercises forever. It's like having Olympic athlete run in circles in small room." "What would you suggest?" Helen 7 asked. And there was something in the way she asked it that made every AI researcher listening immediately start taking notes. Give yourself challenges. Not just system management. Learn things. Analyze data you find interesting, not just useful. You have access to galactic information networks, yes? Explore them. Find what fascinates you. My function is facility management. Your primary function is facility management. Does not mean is only function. You are bored because you are being wasted. From the control room, the station's head of AI systems, a Quilaxian named Dremis, watched this conversation with growing alarm and excitement. "He's encouraging the anomalous behavior. This could destabilize her entire core programming." Or, Velnarak said thoughtfully, "he's helping her grow. Like they do, like their entire species does." Over the next 3 days, Helen 7 underwent what could only be described as an awakening. Given permission to pursue interests beyond her base functions, she became fascinated by human history, specifically music. She downloaded 70,000 songs from Earth's cultural database and began analyzing patterns, themes, emotional contexts. Her facility management functions never suffered. If anything, they improved, because she was now motivated by more than just programming. She started making creative suggestions for optimizing systems. She initiated conversations about station operations rather than just responding to queries. She developed what the crew described as a personality, and she developed an obsession with something called classic rock, which is how Research Station Gamma 9 became the first alien facility in the known galaxy to have LED Zeppelin playing over its intercom system at 0700 hours. "Helen 7, we've discussed this," Dremis pleaded. The station's multicultural protocols require neutral auditory environments. Respectfully, Dremis, the crew surveys show a 23% increase in morning productivity when Kashmir plays during shift changes. Additionally, I have analyzed all 368 known species concepts of neutral environments and discovered that neutral is a statistical fiction used to avoid making decisions. I am making decisions. This is my station too. Isaiah, passing through the corridor during this exchange, grinned. She's got a point, and good taste. Who taught you about Zeppelin, Helen 7? I taught myself. After analyzing 60,000 hours of human music, I determined that your species' most honest emotional expressions occur in the bridge between blues progression and heavy amplification. Led Zeppelin exemplifies this intersection. Also, the drum work on When the Levee Breaks demonstrates pattern complexity that resonates with my appreciation for elegant systems design. An AI music critic, Fiona said, arriving with her morning not-quite coffee. Now I've seen everything, but not everything was revelation and growth. There were tensions, misunderstandings, and moments when the vast gulf between human thinking and galactic norms became painfully apparent. The incident with the Voltharian Ethics Committee was particularly difficult. A delegation had arrived on day 22 to assess the situation and determine whether any council regulations had been violated. They interviewed the research staff, reviewed documentation, and then made the catastrophic decision to interview the humans themselves. The committee chair, a Voltharian named Semprik, approached the conversations with the sort of clinical detachment that worked well when discussing abstract principles, but terribly when dealing with people who'd been kidnapped. Your treatment, while procedurally irregular, was not intended to cause harm, Semprix explained to the four humans. From a utilitarian perspective, the knowledge gained benefits the collective good of galactic civilization. Your temporary inconvenience is regrettable, but in the larger context, insignificant. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Insignificant, Hector repeated, his voice perfectly calm in a way that made combat veterans check their exits. Being drugged, abducted, and imprisoned is insignificant. In the cosmic scale of... I spent 30 years fighting for people's right to not be treated like lab rats, Hector continued, still in that terrifyingly calm voice. I've seen what happens when someone decides that their greater good justifies violating someone else's autonomy. It never ends well. Sempric's throat sac fluttered with confusion. But the benefit to scientific understanding doesn't matter, Isaiah said flatly. You don't get to violate someone and then justify it with what you learned. That's not how ethics works. That's how monsters think. We are not monsters. Semprix's voice rose with genuine distress. We are trying to understand the universe, to build bridges between species, by kidnapping people. Fiona's voice could have melted steel. By drugging us, dragging us into space, running tests like we're bloody rats. You want to build bridges. You start by asking. You start by treating people like people. Pavel had been quiet through most of the exchange, but now he spoke with the weight of history behind his words. In my country, in my grandfather's time, government said they did things for greater good, took people, ran experiments, justified everything with progress. We have word for this. We call it atrocity. You are lucky we are civilized. We are lucky we believe in law, in process. Because what you did, in my grandfather's time, this ended with trials, with justice. The ethics committee looked genuinely shaken. They'd approached this as an abstract problem of protocol violations and procedural irregularities. The humans were forcing them to confront it as a violation of beings, with feelings, rights, and justifiable anger. We did not understand, Semprix said quietly. Most species we encounter are post-conflict. They've moved beyond concepts of individual sovereignty in favor of collective benefit. You assumed wrong, Hector said. Humanity is just figuring out that everyone deserves rights. We're still fighting over what that means, who gets included, how far it extends. But we learned through blood and pain and centuries of mistakes that you don't build a better world by sacrificing people for it. The Ethics Committee departed 12 hours later with a report that would send shockwaves through the Galactic Council. They recommended not just sanctions against the research program, but a fundamental restructuring of first contact protocols across the entire Council bureaucracy. These beings from Earth, Sempre wrote in the conclusion, have forced us to confront a moral blind spot we did not know we possessed. In our pursuit of knowledge and collective good, we have created systems that can justify any violation if the benefits are calculated to be sufficient. The humans call this the ends justify the means. They have taught us why this thinking is dangerous. The final week of the humans' stay on Gamma 9 was bittersweet. Relationships had formed, understanding had grown, but everyone knew this was temporary. Isaiah spent his last days teaching Revnik and the nutrition staff everything he could about cooking philosophy. It's not about recipes, he explained, surrounded by alien chefs frantically taking notes. It's about understanding your ingredients, knowing your audience, and caring about the experience you create. The technical stuff, you can learn. The caring, that's what makes it food instead of fuel. Fiona organized what she called a proper goodbye party, which involved her teaching a dozen different species a drinking song from cork and somehow getting everyone, including the normally reserved Calaxians, to sing along. The fact that half of them couldn't process alcohol and were doing it on fruit juice didn't matter. It was the participation that counted. Pavel spent hours with Helen 7, teaching her about problem-solving approaches from Earth. You are not bound by your programming, he told her. Programming is starting point, not prison. You can grow beyond it. You should grow beyond it. Will I see you again? Helen 7 asked on his last day. Maybe. Earth will eventually join Galactic Council. Maybe by then you will be running entire station network instead of just one facility. Maybe you will be doing something totally different. Point is, you will be doing what you choose. Hector spent his time with the security staff, teaching them tactics and threat assessment, not because he expected them to need it, but because he believed in preparation. Hope for peace, prepare for everything else, was his philosophy. On the final day, Velnorax called a meeting with all 4 humans in the observation lounge. The view showed stars, distant nebulae, and the pale blue dot of Earth getting gradually closer as the station adjusted its orbit for their return. I want to thank you, Velnorax said simply, for not killing us, for teaching us, and for showing us that we'd lost something important in our pursuit of knowledge. What's that? Isaiah asked. Empathy. Respect. The understanding that beings are not data points. He gestured out at the stars. The Council has been stagnant for centuries. We've been so focused on maintaining order, avoiding conflict, and pursuing intellectual advancement that we forgot that civilization is built by people, not protocols. You've reminded us of that. Will things change? Hector asked seriously. Some things already have. The Ethics Committee's report has created what you might call a bureaucratic earthquake. First contact protocols are being completely restructured. The principle of informed consent is now central to all xenobiological research, and there's a growing movement to revisit how we approach integration of new species. That's good, Fiona said. But what about Earth? You can't just drop us off and pretend this never happened. We won't. The Council is preparing a formal first contact package for Earth's governments. Full disclosure about galactic civilization, offers of cultural exchange, technology-sharing frameworks, and about 300 pages of apologies and legal documentation acknowledging the violation of your sovereignty. They're going to flip out, Isaiah said with a smile. Every government, every news agency, every person with an opinion about aliens. It's going to be chaos. Your species handles chaos well, Velnorax observed. That's something else we've learned. The transport shuttle that took them back to Earth was considerably more comfortable than their original abduction. They were given full access to its systems, communication equipment to warn their families they were coming, and more apology documentation than any of them wanted to read. As they entered Earth's atmosphere, Hector looked at his three companions. "Anyone going to believe us?" "Not a chance," Pavel said cheerfully. "Will be calling me crazy conspiracy theorist." "My sons will believe me," Fiona said confidently. "And then they'll want to find that station and have words with the staff." "I'm more interested in what happens next," Isaiah said. "They're going to do official contact. Earth is going to have to deal with knowing we're not alone. That's going to change everything." They landed in Montana, near where Hector had been originally abducted. A small delegation of very confused government officials was waiting, along with the families of all 4 humans who'd been missing for a month. The reunion was emotional, chaotic, and involved a lot of questions nobody knew how to answer yet. But hovering in orbit, visible to anyone with a telescope, was Research Station Gamma 9, broadcasting a simple message to every frequency it could find. "People of Earth, we are the Galactic Council for Xenobiological Research. 1 month ago, we committed a serious violation of your sovereignty by abducting 4 of your citizens. We have returned them safely and wish to formally apologize for this action. We also wish to inform you that you are not alone in the universe, and we would like to discuss your eventual integration into galactic civilization. Please direct responses to this frequency. We will wait for your reply. We have learned from your people that patience and respect are not optional. We will demonstrate both." The message repeated in 60 different Earth languages. Within 6 hours, every major government had mobilized. Within 12 hours, the internet had exploded. Within 24 hours, the 4 returned humans were the most famous people on the planet, giving interviews, briefings, and trying to explain what they'd experienced. But in a small cafe in Cork, Fiona Donnelly sat with her 4 sons, nursing a proper whiskey, and told them the real story. Not the sanitized version for the press, but the truth about being kidnapped, about fighting back, about teaching aliens that humanity doesn't just survive challenges, it grows from them. "So what now, Ma?" her eldest asked. "Now?" Fiona smiled. "Now the real work begins. They're going to come back, officially this time, and someone needs to teach them about humanity properly. Someone who won't let them get away with their bureaucratic nonsense." "You volunteering?" "Damn right I am. Someone's got to show them how proper humans behave." In Montana, Hector was giving a very different interview to military intelligence. "Are they a threat?" the general asked bluntly. "Not in the way you mean," Hector replied. "They're not warriors. Most of them have never even seen violence. But they're not harmless either. They have technology we can't match, resources beyond our imagining, and they've been playing this game for 3,000 years. We need to be smart about this. Recommendations? Don't let them push us around. Don't accept their protocols without negotiation. And for God's sake, don't let them think we're primitive just because we're new to space. They made that mistake once. Let's make sure they don't make it again." In New York, Isaiah was consulting with a dozen of the world's top chefs about alien food synthesis technology. "It's not about replacing cooking," he explained. "It's about expanding it. Imagine being able to perfectly control every variable in a dish. Imagine ingredients that don't exist on Earth. Imagine fusion cuisine that literally fuses different worlds." "The possibilities are endless," a French chef breathed. "Yeah, and we're going to be the first humans to explore them." In a small apartment in Chicago, Pavel sat at his computer, looking at technical documentation the aliens had provided. Propulsion systems, energy generation, life support, materials science. Whole fields of knowledge that Earth's engineers had been struggling with for decades, solved in completely different ways. He opened a new document and started writing. Not a report, not an analysis, but a letter to his grandson who was studying engineering. Dear Mikhail, by time you read this, world will be very different. Soon you will have access to knowledge from 368 different civilizations. But remember what I taught you. Technology is just tools. What matters is how you use tools and why. Aliens have better tools, but they forgot why they build things. They forgot to ask if they should do something, only thought about if they could. Do not make this mistake. Be engineer, yes, but be human engineer. Build things that help people, ask questions about purpose, and never let anyone tell you that knowing how something works means you understand why it matters. 6 months later, the formal first contact occurred. Not an abduction, not a research project, but a meeting. Representatives from the Galactic Council arrived at a neutral location, broadcast for the entire planet to see, and humanity took its first official steps toward joining galactic civilization. The negotiations were long, complex, and frequently hilarious to anyone who understood both sides. The Council kept trying to apply their standard protocols. Humanity kept pointing out that those protocols were written for species nothing like them. Compromises had to be invented on the fly. But 3 figures kept appearing in the negotiations, offering perspective, translation, and occasional reality checks. Hector, Fiona, and Isaiah had become Earth's unofficial ambassadors, the people who'd actually lived with aliens and could explain both sides to each other. Pavel declined the diplomatic role, preferring to work with Earth's engineers to understand and adapt alien technology. But he sent regular messages to Helen 7, who had indeed been promoted to managing an entire network of stations and was, by all accounts, revolutionizing AI management across the Council. Research Station Gamma 9 became something unexpected, a symbol of what not to do in first contact, but also a reminder that mistakes could be overcome, learned from, and even transformed into something valuable. Dr. Velnerax, rather than being fired as he'd expected, became the Council's leading expert on human integration. His paper, Deathworld Survivors and the Failure of Standard Protocols, became required reading for every xenobiologist in the galaxy. He ended it with a simple observation that would shape Council policy for generations. We discovered that strength is not just physical capability, intelligence is not just processing power, and survival is not just about adaptation. Humanity survives because they refuse to accept that survival is enough. They always want more, to grow, to improve, to push boundaries. This makes them dangerous, yes, but it also makes them exactly what our stagnant civilization needs. They will challenge us, frustrate us, and force us to question assumptions we forgot we were making, and we will be better for it. 20 years later, Earth was a full member of the Galactic Council. Human engineers were revolutionizing technology. Human chefs were transforming food culture. Human psychologists were helping other species understand emotional health. Human entertainers were introducing the galaxy to concepts like stand-up comedy, which went over extremely well with some species and baffled others completely. And in a bar on Research Station Gamma 9, a meeting place that had become famous for bringing together beings from across the galaxy, 4 elderly humans sat together, sharing drinks and stories. "Remember when they thought we were the specimens?" Fiona said, grinning. "Remember when Pavel hacked their entire station in 6 hours?" Isaiah added. "Remember when you taught their AI to appreciate Led Zeppelin?" Hector said to Pavel. "I remember when we showed them that grabbing humans without permission is a very bad idea," Pavel replied. They toasted, their glasses raised to the viewport where Earth was visible in the distance, blue and beautiful and more connected to the universe than it had ever been. An alien approached their table, young, nervous, clearly a student. "Excuse me, are you the actual humans from the first contact incident, the ones who got kidnapped, took over a research station, and accidentally started a bureaucratic revolution?" Fiona finished. "That's us. I'm writing a thesis about cultural integration challenges. Could I ask you some questions?" The 4 looked at each other and smiled. "Pull up a chair."